I stood in front of the hallway mirror, staring at the woman who stared back. I barely recognized her. Her eyes were dull, lifeless, framed by dark circles no amount of sleep could erase. Fine lines etched the corners of her mouth and eyes, and her once vibrant hair hung limp, clinging to her face. 15 years ago, that reflection would have shown a bright, spirited girl full of dreams and fire. Today, it was just Miss Sophia Whitaker-Suman's wife, someone's mother, someone who had faded into the background of her own life. I lingered there, lost in exhaustion and disappointment, when David stormed into the hallway, half for the evening. His eyes scanned me from head to toe with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Only now, it was contempt, not desire. "You can't seriously think you're going to the wedding like that," he scoffed. "No, scratch that. You're not going at all." I blinked. "What?" "You heard me." He adjusted his cufflinks, barely glancing at me. "My boss is getting married tonight. This isn't some backyard barbecue. It's an elite, high-end event. Everyone will be bringing women who look like they belong on magazine covers. Tall, glamorous, elegant. You look like a plain gray mouse." I flinched. I wasn't sure if it was the words or the ease with which he spat them out that hurt more. My throat tightened, but I had nothing to say. What could I argue? That I didn't look like that. That I used to. That maybe once, before years of diapers, dishes, and David himself had worn me down, I had felt beautiful. "You embarrass me, Sophia," he continued. "Honestly, look at yourself. You can't expect me to show up with that in a room full of CEOs, models, and celebrities. You drag me down." I froze, letting his words seep in. I thought I'd grown numb over the years, learned to tune out his little jabs, but this one cut deeper. "You're staying home," he added firmly. "I'll tell them you're sick. That's best for both of us." I opened my mouth to protest. Nothing came out, not because I agreed, but because I didn't know how to fight anymore. 15 years of cleaning up after him, cooking his meals, ironing his shirts late into the night while the rest of the house slept. I hadn't bought a new dress in years. I couldn't remember the last time I brushed my hair without interruption from a screaming child or a boiling pot. Explaining any of that would be pointless. He wouldn't care. He never had. To him, what I did was expected, routine, invisible. He wanted someone to blame, scorn, or belittle. He disappeared into his office, slamming the door behind him. I was left in silence, the faint ticking of the old wall clock filling the void. My body felt heavy, as if gravity had doubled its hold. I sank onto the edge of the couch and let the tears fall quiet, steady streaks of pain and shame. But the worst part wasn't what David had said. It was that deep down, I had started to believe him. I didn't cry because of David's words. I cried because I had let him be right. I had let myself disappear so completely that even I had stopped seeing myself. That night, after the door closed behind him, I sat in silence, holding that truth like a stone in my chest. I hadn't just been humiliated by my husband, I had betrayed the girl I used to be. The next morning arrived like any other. I made breakfast, packed lunches, reminded the kids to grab their backpacks. David sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. I wanted to ask him if he really meant what he said, but the words lodged in my throat. Maybe I wasn't ready yet. The days that followed were thick with tension. We barely spoke, only enough to keep the household running. I tried once, twice to bring it up again. I told him I was his wife, that I had every right to go to the wedding, that it wasn't about appearances, it was about respect. But each time I tried, he shut me down with a look, a snort, or worse, silence. "You're not going," he said one evening, not even glancing up from his laptop. "Stop bringing it up. I already told them you're sick. That's that." I almost gave in, almost let it go. A few days before the wedding, I passed my daughter's room. Emma sat on the floor, carefully fixing a tiny dress onto her favorite doll. She hummed softly, brushing its hair before tucking it into a toy bed. I lingered in the hallway, unnoticed, and something struck me like a spark I hadn't felt in years. What was I teaching her? That silence meant strength. That shrink in herself was love. Every time I let her father diminish me, that's what she learned. I felt fire burning in my chest. I couldn't let her grow up thinking this was normal. I couldn't let her think love looked like control, like contempt. That night, sleep evaded me. I stared at the ceiling, rehearsing what I would say, holding on to the small spark of strength growing inside me. By morning, it wasn't a flicker anymore. It was steady, small, but steady. When David came down to the kitchen, I waited until the kids were gone. Then I faced him, met his eyes, and said calmly, "I'm going to that wedding." David, he frowned. "We've been over this. You're not invited?" "I'm your wife," I replied. "I don't need an invitation, and if you don't take me, I'll go myself. I'll show up alone and tell everyone why I had to." His expression shifted surprise, then anger. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one who stood tall, who didn't flinch. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "I would," I said, firmly. "Try me." For the first time in a long while, I saw something other than indifference in his eyes. Fear. David stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman before him. Then he let out a short, bitter laugh. "Fine, you win," he said. My heart skipped. "But on one condition," he added coldly. "You don't go with me. Take a cab. Arrive at least 2 hours after the ceremony starts. After everyone's already relaxed, tipsy, distracted. You come in quietly, sit at the farthest table, and keep a low profile. I don't want your presence turning heads." He spoke like he was tossing me a bona crumb of acceptance after stripping me of dignity. Not formed in my throat, but I nodded. Insulting. Yes. Ideal. No. But for the first time in years, I had stood up for myself. This small, pitiful victory was my foot in the door. When he left for work, slamming the door behind him, I sank into the armchair. My body felt drained. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I expected. Hands trembling, I reached for my phone. Without thinking, I scrolled through contacts and tapped a name I hadn't called in a while. "Julia." "Sophia, what's wrong?" she said immediately. She didn't need me to explain. That's the kind of friend she was. I broke down, telling her everything, the insult, the wedding, the so-called condition. I could hear her breathing shift, growing heavier with every word. "Don't move," she said, voice low and firm. "We're coming over." "We?" I asked. "Svetlana's with me." Svetlana, my other closest friend since high school. Bold, confident, always dressed like she'd walked straight off a fashion spread. She worked as a buyer for a luxury boutique and had a sixth sense for style. Both of them had watched me fade over the years, pleading with me to leave David, calling him a tyrant more times than I could count. And I had always defended him, made excuses, but not today. Less than 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Julia with a massive makeup case in one hand and Valeria hauling seamless garment bags behind her. Valeria stepped inside, kicked off her heels, and narrowed her eyes. "All right, soldier," she said, "wipe those tears. Operation Cinderella begins now." I laughed through the lump in my throat, unsure whether to cry harder or collapse into their arms. Julia hugged me tightly. "Let's remind that man exactly what kind of mouse he married." And just like that, everything began to change. The living room became a whirlwind of fabric, brushes, and laughter. Valeria unzipped the garment bags to reveal 3 breathtaking evening gowns. One was deep navy silk, sprinkled with tiny crystals that shimmered like stars. Another, emerald green, with an asymmetrical cut and a daring yet elegant slit. The last, a blush pink creation so delicate it looked like a cloud of rose petals. "These are designer pieces," I whispered, stunned. Valeria grinned. "And you think we'd send you into battle in a bathrobe? Try them on." I slipped into the emerald green gown first. Turning to face the mirror, I gasped. The dress hugged my waist and flowed over my hips as if made for me. I hadn't worn anything this beautiful in years, maybe. Not since my wedding day. Julia immediately went to work, opening her massive makeup case like a surgeon preparing for surgery. "First, we treat the skin, hydration, glow. We want you to shine from the inside out." I sat like a mannequin as she layered primer, foundation, and soft highlighter onto my skin. Her fingers moved quickly, expertly brushing and blending. "We'll do a smoky eyes, not dramatic, just enough to make your eyes look endless, and the lips something berry-toned, bold but classic." I caught glimpses of myself as she worked, each stroke bringing back a piece of me I hadn't seen in years. Meanwhile, Valeria rifled through boxers of shoes and accessories, finally holding up strappy heels and a matching clutch. "These," she said, placing them beside me, "belong on someone who knows her worth." Then came the hair. They washed it with a gloss-enhancing shampoo and blow-dried it into soft, voluminous wave snow, stiff updo. No overdone curls, just natural beauty elevated. By the time they were done, I wasn't allowed to look in the mirror. "Not yet," Julia said. "One last step." They led me upstairs to the full-length mirror in my bedroom. I closed my eyes, heart racing. "Okay," Valeria said. I opened them and froze. Staring back wasn't the exhausted mother of 2 who hadn't bought a new lipstick in years. It wasn't the woman who begged her husband for scraps of affection. It was me. I thought I'd lost, but brighter, stronger, radiating something I hadn't felt in ages. Power, confidence, beauty. My eyes shimmered beneath smoky tones. My skin glowed. The gown fit like second skin, and the heels made me stand taller not just physically, but emotionally. I looked like I belonged in the world David had fought to keep me out of. Mom, a small voice said behind me. I turned to see my son, Leo, in the doorway, eyes wide, holding his toy truck loosely at his side. You look like a princess, he whispered in awe. Something inside me broke and healed all at once. I knelt, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart." That evening, as I walked down the stairs and out the door, I wasn't just heading to a wedding. I was stepping into a version of myself I hadn't known still existed. I wasn't afraid anymore. The car pulled up just outside the gates of the country club, its polished stone entrance glowing under string lights and soft shimmer. I had asked the driver to stop a little farther down the road. After all, that was part of the deal. David's humiliating condition. Arrive late. Keep a low profile. Don't draw attention. He wanted me to sneak in like a shameful secret butt. I had no intention of sneaking. I stepped out of the car. Heels clicked steadily against the stone path. The cool air kissed my skin through the silk of the emerald dress, but instead of shivering, I welcomed it. It kept me alert, grounded. As I approached the grand entrance, 2 security guards glanced my way. One straightened, the other blinked twice. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored door tall, composed, every strand of hair perfect, makeup untouched, gaze steady. Valeria's voice echoed in my mind, "Walk like you own the room." The moment I crossed the threshold into the ballroom, it felt as if someone had turned the volume down. Dozens of voices chatter, laughter, clinking glasses suddenly faded into a hush. All eyes turned toward me. Golden sconces lined the walls. Marble floors reflected the chandeliers, but all I saw were the heads tilting, conversations halting. Someone dropped a fork. One man turned, then another, then an entire table. And there I stood, the woman who was never supposed to be noticed, the woman who was told to stay invisible, the woman David was ashamed of. Now she was the center of the room. I didn't flinch. I didn't fidget. Chin high, I moved with quiet confidence, just like Julia had coached me across the ballroom. I spotted David. He was near the groom's boss and a few high-ranking colleagues, laughing at something, drinks in hand. But as the hush spread, his eyes followed the shift. He turned, saw me, and his smile evaporated. Mouth parted slightly, brows furrowed, disbelief written across his face. He didn't see his tired housewife. He saw a woman who didn't belong to him anymore. Before he could move, someone stepped into my path. "Forgive me," a rich voice said, smooth as velvet with a southern lilt, "but I don't believe we've been introduced." I looked up to see a man in a tailored navy suit, tall, composed, hair slightly graying at the temples, eyes warm, intelligent. He met mine with curiosity, not arrogance. "I am Daniel Montgomery," he said, offering a glass of champagne. "Best man, lifelong friend of the groom." "Sophia," I replied, accepting the drink. Our fingers brushed Briefly, he held my gaze for a moment, then smiled. Sophia, that's a lovely name. Fitting? Fitting? I asked, cheeks flushing. For someone who just stole the room. Are you here alone? He asked. My husband's here, I said, nodding toward the far end where David stood frozen, watching us, his expression darkening. Daniel followed my gaze, his smile faltering just for a moment. Well, he said, lifting his glass, if he's not by your side, he's either very foolish or very brave. I didn't answer. I sipped the champagne and smiled. Daniel didn't leave my side. We drifted between conversations, and whenever someone tried to pull him away, he gently redirected back to me. Not clinging, not performative, simply present. He asked about me, not my husband. Favorite movies, books, museums. I told him I used to paint, still lives mostly, though I hadn't touched a brush in years. That's a shame, he said, leaning in just enough for me to catch his subtle, expensive, comforting good corogne. You look like someone who sees beauty in things others overlook. No one had said that to me in I didn't know how long. Then the music shifted. The lights dimmed slightly. The band began a soft diru-tingu-waru-tu, something timeless, slow dot. Daniel turned toward me, extended his hand with a slight bow. May I? I hesitated for a heartbeat, glancing across the room. David stood like a statue, arms crossed, jaw clenched. So tight the muscles twitched beneath his skin. I placed my hand in Daniel's, and he led me onto the dance floor. His hand settled lightly at my waist, the other clasping mine, and for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to let go, to lean into someone's arms and just breathe. The music moved through us, and so did something else. Warm? Thrilling? Terrifying? People watched? Whispered. Some smiled. A few chuckles came from David's circle. David's been hiding her all this time. She's stunning. Man's got a real queen at home. David's ears flushed crimson. I didn't care. For those few minutes, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a housewife. I wasn't someone's burden or embarrassment. I was just a woman, a beautiful woman. When the music ended, applause rippled through the room. Even the bride and groom came over. Daniel laughed. You always find the most beautiful woman in the room. He turned to me. Sophia, you were la dianto. I smiled politely, but before I could respond, David appeared. Tight smile. His hand grabbed my arm just above the elbow. Thanks, he said flatly. We're heading home now. He didn't wait for an answer. He started pulling me toward the exit. I waved a soft goodbye to Daniel. His eyes stayed on mine steady, reassuring as I disappeared into the night. The ride home was silent. David gripped the steering wheel so tightly I could hear the leather creak. I stared out the window, city lights blurring past. My heartbeat caught somewhere between euphoria and dread. The moment we stepped inside the house, it exploded. What the hell was that? He spat, slamming the door. You embarrassed me? Throwing yourself at some rich jerk like a desperate. I didn't throw myself at anyone, I said calmly. He asked you to dance. He had his hands all over you. No, I replied, voice low but steady. He had his hand on my waist just like every other couple dancing. You looked ridiculous, he barked, stepping closer. Like some overdone, I challenged. Say what you really want to say. His eyes narrowed. Fingers dug into my arm hard. You think a dress and some makeup change what you are. You're still nothing, Sophia. Just a gray mouse in a prettier box. Something inside me snapped. I wrenched my arm free. For the first time in 15 years, I looked him straight in the eyes, didn't flinch. No, David, I said coldly. I'm not the one who is nothing. You are. The next morning, I woke with a dull ache in my arm, where he had grabbed me. A faint red mark lingered like a stain. I sat on the edge of the bed in my robe, staring at the vanity across the room. The makeup had long since been washed away, the dress folded back into its garment bag. But the woman who had looked in the mirror last night, she still lingered somewhere beneath my skin. As I reached for my clutch to grab my phone, something small and stiff slid out of the side pocket a card. I picked it up, staring at the embossed lettering, Daniel Montgomery, Montgomery Property, Charlotte, North Carolina, a phone number beneath. He must have slipped it into my hand at the end of the nightsode, discreetly. I hadn't even noticed. Just a brief brush of fingers as we said goodbye. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now, holding the card, something stirred dangerous, electric. I shouldn't. I was still married, but I also wasn't living. The urge to text him sat in my chest like held breath. I paced the kitchen, phone in hand, typing and deleting the same message over and over. Thank you for last night. Too vague. It was nice meeting you. Too formal. Finally, I wrote what I meant. Hi, it's Sophia. Thank you for everything. I hit send. Dan immediately regretted it. My heart pounded. What if he didn't reply? What if he thought I was chasing him? Ding. His response came in less than a minute. Sophia, I was hoping you'd reach out. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. May I call you sometime? I stared at the screen, the words glowing like a soft light. Over the next few days, we didn't speak by phone, but we texted. Long, slow conversations stretching from morning to night. He asked questions, never pried. He never pushed. He listened. He told me about his love for photography, how he traveled often for work, and how sometimes he went weeks without anyone truly looking him in the eye. One evening, he asked me what made me happy. I hesitated before typing. I used to paint still lifes. Landscapes? I haven't done it in years. Do you have any of your work? I'd love to see it, he replied. After staring at the screen for a long moment, I sent him a photo of an old painting I'd done, fruit in a cracked ceramic bowl, shadows curling like smoke across a weathered wooden table. His response came instantly. Sophia, that's incredible. You have real talent. You can't let it die. You should paint again for yourself, not anyone else. Something shifted in me. The way he saw me really saw me was like being watered after years of drought. He didn't want anything from me. He didn't pity me. He just believed I could be more. And slowly, I began to believe it too. The decision didn't arrive in a single moment. It came quietly, like a tide rolling in. Nights spent texting Daniel, mornings waking next to a man who didn't see me, afternoons when the silence in the house weighed heavier than the noise ever had. One evening, I waited for David to come home. The kids were at my sister's for the night. I wore no makeup, no special dress, just jeans and a soft sweater. Nothing about me screamed rebellion, except my resolve. He stepped inside, loosened his tie, barely glanced at me before heading to the kitchen. David, I said calmly. He turned. I'm filing for divorce. He laughed loud, sharp, as if I had just told a joke. And go where, Sophia? With what money? Who's going to take care of you? That guy from the wedding. I didn't answer. You really think he wants you? A woman with 2 kids and baggage. Please. He'll get bored in a month, and you'll come crawling back. Then, if that happens, I said quietly, I'd still rather be alone than here. His smile faded. I stood, walked past him without looking back. The next day, I called Julia. Within 20 minutes, she and Valeria were at my door, trunk open, boxers ready, no questions asked. We packed quick essentials only, clothes, art supplies I hadn't touched in years, a photo album, Emma's favorite stuffed bear, Leo's sketch pad. They didn't cry. They didn't ask why. Somehow, even at their young age, they knew we left before David came home for the first time in 15 years. I shut the door behind me, and it felt like I was locking a cell from the outside. Daniel was patient. He didn't push me to move in with him. He understood I needed space, time, healing, but supported me in every way that mattered. He hired a top divorce attorney, unshakable, who helped me file properly, secure child support, and protect our assets. David tried to fight, of course, with threats, insults, and manipulation. But the lawyer shut him down at every turn. I never had to speak to him directly again. Daniel helped me find a small apartment near the kids' school. Nothing fancy, but clean, warm, safe. He bought Emma a reading nook filled with her favorite books. He took Leo to soccer practice on weekends, not to replace their father, but simply to show up consistently. Meanwhile, I, Sophia Whitaker the Gray Mouse, up for night classes in graphic design. I was terrified, but I showed up every evening. After tucking the kids in, I studied, I watched tutorials, I drew again, designed flyers, mock-ups, color palettes. It felt like remembering how to breathe. One of my instructors pulled me aside. One day, you've got something rare, he said. Don't waste it. Those words stayed with me. A few months later, I landed a junior design position at a boutique agency in uptown Charlotte. Small team, big dreams. They welcomed me like I belonged, like I had something to offer. Because I did. My life was no longer built around surviving David's moods. It was built around becoming me again. And this time, I wasn't doing it alone. It didn't happen with a grand gesture or fireworks. Daniel didn't rent out a restaurant or fly me somewhere exotic. One evening, we were having dinner at a small lakeside cafe just outside Charlotte. The kids laughed over their desserts. The sun set in warm tones across the water. Everything felt soft. Safe, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you walked into that ballroom. wearing that green dress and changing the temperature of the entire room. I smiled, misty-eyed. I love your children like they're mine. I love the way you see the world. I want to spend the rest of my life seeing it with you. Then he pulled out a small velvet box. Simple, elegant, thoughtful, just like him. Sophia Whitaker, will you marry me? I didn't need to think, I whispered. Yes. The kids cheered, wrapping their arms around us. A few months later, we moved into a house. We picked together a charming craftsman-style home tucked into a quiet neighborhood of oak trees and flower beds, a wraparound porch, a big kitchen, and most importantly, an upstairs room with floor-to-ceiling windows. It became my studio. Daniel filled it with easels, brushes, canvases, and shelves of watercolor paper and oil paints. I painted for real, this time not just to remember who I was, but to create who I was becoming. The kids thrived. Leo joined a local art club. Emma started ballet. Our home was filled with music, messy dinners, half-finished puzzles, and love. So much love it spilled out of every doorway. David, meanwhile, unraveled. He tried to maintain appearances, shoes, stiff collar, telling colleagues I had run off with some rich guy. But the truth caught up. His co-workers learned the full story. His boss, the same man whose wedding we had attended, sat him down. I thought you were a decent man. Turns out you didn't deserve the woman you had. David lost his job a few months later, not because of me, but because the foundation of his life, the one I had quietly maintained, was gone. No more crisp shirts ironed before dawn. No more hot dinners waiting. No more steady wife keeping his life from falling apart. He tried dating again, but it never lasted. He grew bitter, angrier. He started drinking. Friends stopped calling. Invitations stopped coming. Nearly 2 years later, I was walking out of a cafe with Daniel and the kids, laughing at Emma's marshmallow mustache, Leo's awful joke. Don't even remember what. Across the street, I saw him, David, leaning against a lamppost, paper cup in hand. He didn't speak. He didn't call out. He just stared. And I knew he recognized what he had lost, not just a wife, not just a family, but a life he could have had. He had thrown it all away for pride, for control, for ego, and now justice had been served, not by vengeance, not by courtroom drama, but by life itself. He stood alone, watching the family he could have had disappear around the corner into a future he would never be part of. And me, I never looked back.